welcome to Try Talking Sport, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and a little bit of entertainment. I cannot believe we are into the final week of August. Time is simply flying by. I hope you've been keeping busy and well since the last episode of the show. Did you set some new goals and challenges for yourself since the last episode? If not, this week is as good a time as any to look at what you can do in the month of September. This time of year for me always feels like a mini new year. I think it's that association with maybe going back to school. Speaking of goals, my big swimming goal for the month was slightly sidetracked, as unfortunately I picked up an ear infection that saw my daily dips and swimming in Galway Bay stopped for 7 days. Thankfully, I am back on track and have just over 17 kilometres completed of my Galway Bay virtual challenge to swim 26k during the month of August in the open water in Togs. To be honest, I still haven't pulled my wetsuit out of the garage. Little bit of pressure this week to get it done, but that's part of the fun of this goal. The weather hasn't helped, but a few double swims this week should see me cross the line by next Monday, hopefully. This week's guest of the podcast is Katrina Matthews. The British Army Physiotherapist and BMC-Vifit athlete has blazed a trail in triathlon since taking up the sport just a few years ago. As an amateur athlete, she excelled quickly, with numerous titles and wins under her belt. She joined the professional ranks of triathlon in 2019, a little earlier than even she expected, after a superb performance at Challenge Gran Canaria, finishing as first amateur and second overall on the day. Jumping right in and embracing life as a pro triathlete, she has already proven herself as one to watch. Her debut Ironman in Australia saw her take 4th place with a sub 9-hour finish in a time of 8 hours 53 minutes. On the back of her podium finishes in Staffordshire, Finland and Weymouth Ironman 70.3 races and a 16th place finish at the Ironman 70.3 World Championships in Nice of last year. The ETU Elite Middle Distance Champion of 2019 added a British national cycling title to her trophy cabinet last week, winning the 100-mile time trial in a time of 3 hours, 55 and 22 seconds. With a positive can-do attitude, her passion for her profession as both an athlete and a physiotherapist shine through in this episode. She has set some lofty goals for herself in the past and has well exceeded them. Her goals for 2021 and beyond are well within her reach. We can expect to see a lot more from Katrina Matthews in the future. Enjoy the show. Katrina Matthews, thank you so much for joining me on Try Talking Sport this week. It's great to see you and catch up. I think the last time I saw you was in Weymouth in 2019.
Yeah, hi Joe. Yeah, it's really good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Weymouth feels like a long time ago. As so much has happened just in life as well.
So tell us, what have you been at since Weymouth? Because I know you have won the Ironman VR18 and you were also crowned the National Time Trial Championships last weekend in the UK. So you've been a busy lady.
Yeah, I mean, right back to Weymouth was September last year. I just come back from the World Champ 70.3, which I wasn't really expecting to qualify for as a pro so quickly on. But just did that, did Weymouth. And then in that sort of couple of weeks before Nice, I had decided to enter an Ironman. So my first full one. So I did that in December. That went really well. Definitely should probably mention the wedding in November before that.
And then just in case you get into any trouble.
He won't mind. I think he sees my Ironman as more important than our wedding anyway. But no. Yeah, and then was gearing up really nicely for Challenge Toulouse in March, and then big pandemic. So I've been sort of settling into training as best I can, and then just really enjoying I've had the opportunity through the Army to just have that time, because we're not racing, to just genuinely just get better. So just train and focus on that while we've been in the lockdown period. Very fortunate in that aspect, I know. And so I'm actually really looking forward to racing now. So we've had the 100 mile and the VR, and then a few other, sort of Strava, let's go out and see how fast you can do a 5k sort of things. But hopefully I'm racing in Tallinn in a couple of weeks.
Tallinn in Estonia, yeah, it seems to be one of the very few Ironman races that seem to still be on schedule, thankfully, for 2020.
Yeah, it's technically the first Ironman branded event, I think, and there's a Pro 70.3 alongside the the main Ironman, and they're being very positive. But I think the race will go ahead no matter what, but it will be whether people can travel and how they then have to sacrifice their time in terms of making sure that they abide by the isolation rules after they come back as well. So we shall see.
But you had a great, I suppose, not a breakthrough year is probably not the way to say it, because you were doing really well in 2018, but 2019 you just seemed to come from nowhere, and then suddenly you were on podiums at every race that you completed.
Yeah, I mean, I did my first age group. So my first race of 2019 was the Gran Canaria Challenge middle distance. And I put down in like performance wise what I had hoped for in terms of numbers that I'd been training for over the winter. But it was good enough to take the top spot in the amateur competition, and then also time wise to come just behind Emma Pallant a couple of minutes. So it gave me that automatic qualification for the pro license. And I just joined Team Free Speed, and I was really set up for a whole year, a whole season of really committing to the age group, doing really well. I qualified for Nice in my age group, and I was, really looking forward to the year. So that was a bit of a shocker because I had that decision point to make. Do I go pro, or, take up the professional license, or do I just commit to being, the best age group where I am? Because at this point, I had also just found out that the Army was going to support me to train full time. So I had a tough decision to make, but at the same time, I knew from that result in Gran Canaria that I was definitely good enough. It wasn't just an ad hoc result. And I think that was quite key for me. Plus, I had the time to train full time, so I needed to give it a proper go. So yeah, just made the jump, and then raced Stafford. I think it was 5 weeks later as my first pro race. And I was so pumped in that race to, I guess, to prove myself in the professional ranks. And also, I had already booked my accommodation for Nice as an age grouper. So in my head, I was like, I've already booked the accommodation. I need to qualify. It was going to be a massive long shot, but I knew that third would get me a qualification slot. So I think I ran down to get into third in the last couple of K, I think. Really just basically, I just ran down the hills really, really fast and took a lot of time out of the person in front of me. So yeah, it was definitely a breakthrough.
It was a very exciting race, if memory serves me right. I think Lucy Charles Barkley was there and Emma Pallant, and then yourself in third as well. And there was great excitement on the finish line with the three of you coming in, because you were quite close together.
I can't remember the time. I think it was a good race, definitely. I wasn't challenging Lucy Emma for the first or second, but to get third I was really chuffed with. I think actually the sort of getting on the podium with those two in my first pro race was probably just as equally as motivating as qualifying for Nice, which is a bit sad really, but yeah.
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think it's a great testament to where you've come from in terms of your age group results and then stepping up to that professional license. But I want to go back a bit, Kat, because I'd love to know where this all came from. Like, where did Katrina Rye, who's now Katrina Matthews, get started in sport, and where has this passion for triathlon come from?
So I was always an active kid. My father was in the Royal Marines, and my mum used to be in the Army, and then she was also a runner. So I did a lot of just general activity. We did a lot of orienteering as kids, me and my older brother, as every holiday, Wales, Scotland. And I also did swimming lessons and swam in the local club just a couple of times a week. So all through school, I did sort of cross-country running. I played a lot of hockey. I was playing National League at sort of 17, 18 before I went to uni. And also like regional level basketball. Love basketball so much. But yeah, swimming, I had kept going all the way through school, which I think has obviously been really key. Even I was only swimming 3 hours a week, but it was enough to... I haven't got back to how good I was then. I think I was swimming I think my PB was like a 104 for a 100-meter freestyle. So I'm still trying to get back to where I was as a kid, which is frustrating. And then, yeah, did loads of running. I did cross country. So I narrowly missed out on the national cross country team. So there's definitely an element of I used to be like relatively good, but spread my sort of efforts as a child, which I think is actually the best way. I'm really pleased about that. And had a gap year, got pretty fat, didn't do any exercise, came back, had a place to get physio at Cardiff, and I was like, maybe I'll do a little bit more exercise. And so I actually did my first ever triathlon before I went to university. But I borrowed a bike from someone down the road, and I think I did it in a raincoat. And it was one of those pool ones where, so you're not quite sure what's going on. So that's technically my first ever triathlon. But I decided it was way too much effort at uni to be in the triathlon sphere and way more sociable to play hockey. So went back playing hockey, and then so that was sort of, I played at first team Cardiff. We were pretty good, but also quite sociable. No one took themselves too seriously, which was really nice. When I finished uni, I then joined the army, and that was my first job in the army, was at Headley Court, the rehab centre. So it was basically my dream job as a physio, and they also had a swimming pool there. So this was 2015 by then, and I was like, well, I might as well swim. I think I had like maybe 50 or 60 steps out of my bedroom to the swimming pool, and then I could get to work within 30 seconds or something. It was all in one sort of complex. And so started swimming, and I think at that point I was maybe doing, right, I'm going to do 10 times 100 meters and then just get out. Like that was a decent set for me. So swimming, I just very slowly started back up, and then I had a road bike that I'd use as my little commuting bike while I was at uni. For, I think we bought it £200-300 or something, third hand probably, from the local bike shop. And I started going out for a few cycle rides on that, but I barely cycled. I just used the watt bikes in the gym. And then I did my first, like I would say, like my first actual proper triathlon within the sort of army race circuit, and did really well. So I was like, oh, this is cool. So, and then that sort of motivated me to be like, okay, I'm going to start actually training for this. So that's the precursor to getting into triathlon.
You raced across Sprint Olympic for a couple of years locally, kind of thing, and within the army group as well. And then you moved up to 70.3 distance. Yeah.
So the first 2 years, 2.5, 3, I did the sort of standard distance. And once I'd done a couple of races in the sort of local, like the local races, I just had a little Google about, you know, what people do in triathlon. Like I didn't know where you go, because obviously I couldn't go to the Olympics. So what do normal people do? And I found the GB age group races, and so I entered a couple of those and qualified for the Europeans and the Worlds, which obviously is like the same year and then the next year. I actually broke my wrist before the European. So I was swimming in that race in, I don't know when it was, 2017, with like zinc oxide all the way around my wrist, because I couldn't, basically, I worked out that I could use my tri bike, and I would risk the amount of times. It was maybe a little bit dangerous, but it wasn't. I was safe. Yeah, so that wasn't great. And then a couple of months later, I did the World's ITU standard distance in Rotterdam that year, and that was really fun. And I ran a sub 40 10k, and I was just so chuffed. And I wasn't actually going to go into middle distance, honestly. At this point, it's only a couple of years ago, I thought the idea of doing middle distance and Ironman was absolutely bonkers. I had absolutely no intention of it at all. So I entered the British age group champs in 2018. So that's what I was training for all of that winter. And then Classic Army, which is amazing, they were like, we want you to go to Canada for 4 months. And it was over that race. And so I'd spent 4 or 5 months just in my sort of normal day-to-day job, physio, 8 till 5, and then doing training either side and at lunchtime sometimes. And then suddenly it was like, no, you can't do that race that you've been training for. And I was like, it was really quite stressful. I didn't realize how quite obsessed that you get over goals like that when you've put so many hours into it. And so I obviously jumped at the chance to go to Canada, because it was, again, an absolute dream to do physio out there. And while I was out there, I noticed after a couple of weeks that there was a 70.3 race in Calgary, which is 2 hours down the road. So that was me saying, well, if I can't do the British champs, I'm just going to do a middle distance instead. And I managed to persuade a couple of people who were out there with me just for those 4 months to do as well. They had never done triathlon before. So 2 of them were like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And I think there's a guy and a girl. The guy was definitely thought he could beat me. And so there was a little bit of, right, okay, let's get training for this.
And then you went on, you did Calgary and you won.
Yeah, I mean, I actually won the overall event because there was no pros. Took the overall age group too. I think a couple of the guys beat me, but I actually had a really bad time over that last. Was it 2 months before that race? So Calgary must have been maybe June, July of 2018. In May, when I just got out to Canada, it was just before Canada. I picked up a sort of overload injury in my knee that meant I couldn't swim, bike or run. I couldn't get down the stairs. I couldn't walk to the shops without being in like genuine sort of like real discomfort and pain, local swelling, and couldn't kick, couldn't swim with a pool boy, couldn't do anything. And it was driving me crazy. And so when I went out to Canada, I had that whole sort of like semi, identity thing of being like, well, I know I am a fit individual, but I can't do any exercise at the moment. It was, again, just quite a stressful period. But I was lucky enough that I had a gym on site. And so just really committed to rehab. And before that middle distance, I had got back to swimming and I'd got back to cycling, and I'd done maybe 30 minutes, then I did 40 minutes, then I did 50, like really steady build. And I'd done 2 or 3 runs, because classic physio in getting athlete, not physio, should know better. In getting back to running, I then pulled my calf. I had no running at all. That has given me so much confidence for like life now, is if you do pick up those little running injuries, you can stay so fit by gym work and your CV on the bike. So yeah, I went into that. I think I ran like a 1:30, which for me at the time, I was like, oh, that'll do. No run training really. So I was really pleased with that. And it wasn't too bad.
So how did you deal with the mental aspect of that? Because, being a fit individual, you mentioned there losing a bit of your identity, or you have that identity of being a fit individual, but suddenly you're injured. But it's actually daily activity you couldn't do, never mind training activity. So how do you deal with that setback from a mental perspective?
Yeah. At the time, you just get through it, don't you, in terms of dealing with it. I don't think I employed any specific strategies, but I really took a step back and looked at the bigger picture. I gave myself, right, in 3 months' time, that's where I want to be, not worrying about that day or worrying about that week. So I asked for help. So I went to the doctor and I got some, anti-inflammatory medication. I went to the physio and I got a brace. And at that time, I needed a brace to support my knee. And I committed to not just ignoring it and walking on it as little as possible. And I treated it like a proper injury. And I think sometimes we're guilty of just ignoring it if it's not bad enough, or it's not, you haven't got a diagnosis. But if it stops you doing something, then that's something you need to, sort out. And then the mental side of it was really hard. It was, because like I said, of the turning up to somewhere new, making friends, and you don't have that, oh yeah, let's go for a run, or what are you doing this evening? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to the gym because I can't do anything. But I think, again, yeah, just long-term goals. And the idea, I think a lot of people have said it recently, it's just focusing on what you can do. And so I decided that I was going to do X, Y, and Z in terms of exercises, and I was going to get stronger in those. And then that ultimately would make me sort of better again. So as long as I focused on getting stronger at those specific things, that then in turn would get me fitter in the long term.
And when the shoe was on the other foot, because obviously you were giving advice to your patients, are you a good patient when the shoe was on the other foot?
No, and it's actually quite hard as a physio to preach to somebody and then they're like, oh, and they realise you're injured as well. It's a sort of it's one of those things. But I've come to learn that an injury is inevitable. In any sport, especially with running, injury is inevitable, and you can try and mitigate against it, but it is going to happen. And if you're actually training on the line, so if you're never injured, potentially you're never actually trying to find where your limit is, which is great if you just want to be happy and train all the time. Brill. So do I practice what I preach? Probably not, but I definitely utilize some of those like skills to have that reflection and say, no, I'm going to do this. But it's hard when you've got all of the information in front of you. It's hard to say this is the right thing to do because there's so many options. So I do rely on other people to remind me that, no, you should do this, even though I know I should. You sometimes just need to be told, I think. And that's where the whole physio, or mentor or coach is really useful in triathlon.
And it's about the accountability as well, I think, because we can self-regulate so far and be motivated to a certain point. But when you've got somebody maybe looking over your shoulder or looking at things or telling you to do something, or as an athlete that you've got a physio appointment in a week's time and you haven't done the stretching and things like that they've told you to do, know you'll probably do them. It's like doing your homework.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that I've always had really good communication with my coach with that. Like he's let me guide my own sort of S&C program as such. But even the other day, he was like, Kat, I think you should, you should start noting down on Training Peaks when you're doing these mobility and when you're doing these strengths. Because what have you actually done over the last month? And I've been like, nothing. So yeah, it's the accountabilities. It's so useful.
But it's the one, I think that the strength and conditioning piece is the bit that none of us really want to do. I thought it was just me, but that stretching and foam rolling and all the physio bits and pieces that will get some of those marginal gains for racing, but also keep us in peak performance, that we'll happily put on our runners, our togs, our bike gear and go do swim, bike or run, but then take 20 minutes out to do stretching and rolling and you just won't do it.
Yeah. And to be honest, most people don't have the time. And if you want to prioritize your time to get better at triathlon, there's definitely an argument for not doing it and doing swim, bike, run, which is probably not what many physios say because they like the idea of, rehab being king. But if you've got a limited amount of time, you've got to prioritize that. I have no excuse now. So that's the other thing, that if you've got the time, why not try and make those little gains? We don't know that foam rolling prevents injuries, but if it makes you feel good and it makes you feel better that evening or the next day for the next session, then you're going to perform better in the next session. That's sort of fact. So the psychology of taking that time out and doing something is definitely worth it in my opinion.
So you mentioned there that you've no excuse now because you have all the time to do it. So what does your schedule look like now?
It is quite varied. I wouldn't say I had a very strict, this is a Monday, this is a Tuesday. It really depends on how I'm feeling that week, what else is going on. But a typical week over this sort of lockdown period without any racing or travel or house moves has been probably like a long bike ride on Monday. So maybe 3 hours or something. I might do the first bit of it without any carbohydrate, depending on how the session went on Sunday, depending on how I feel, and then a swim. And then Tuesday might be the same, or it might be some bike intervals, might do a little run as well. So maybe 40 minutes with maybe sort of 20 minutes and then 10 minutes drills and then a 10 minutes off it. I don't do much running before anyone comments. Wednesday might be a hard run session. So it might be hills or it might be intervals, or to be honest, at the moment, I'm not doing any fast stuff at all because I'm on that sort of borderline of niggles. So probably another gentle run, perhaps up to an hour, depending on how I feel. And then Thursday, another bike interval. So I'm maybe doing 2 bike intervals on the turbo or on the road if it's dry. I like doing my bike intervals when they're really hard on the turbo because I do get a little bit wary about knowing a good stretch of road to complete the interval. I'm quite tunnel visioned when it comes to intervals. Like I like to get those numbers hit. And so I find, and then safety on the road, like if you're going all out, I just don't like the idea of that because you just can't be as safe. And then Friday is normally slightly easier because then Saturday, Sunday I get to train properly with Mark, so my husband. So Saturday would be like a long brick, so maybe 4 or 5 hours with a build, and then maybe 20 to 40 minute run off it, and then that's in preparation for Sunday, which is going to be a long run, so maybe an hour and a half. So it varies, but anywhere between 18 and 24 hours is probably normal. I was doing a couple of bigger weeks earlier in the year. I mean, a few, maybe sort of up to 30, I think was my max, when I was doing a lot more zone 2. So through January and February, I was doing basically all zone 2. I don't think I did anything other, which was a weird and sort of training stimulus to start with. But I really feel like, firstly, I now fall in love with it. It's very easy and fun. And you can do lots of volume. Whereas obviously when you're starting to look at racing, it's the intensity. So I'm trying to bring back, and over the last month, like I said, the intervals, I've been doing some 30 to 40 minute race pace intervals and then some tempo runs off the bike quite hard, and some tempo runs as well, which is another first for me. I haven't really done that sort of extended 4 or 5K times 2 at the moment. Really simple stuff in terms of tempo running. So quite basic probably for somebody listening who has more experience.
But there's plenty volume still in it though as well. I mean, that amount of time is going to make a difference to your performance over time. And it's funny, a lot of us will look and say zone 2, we don't like doing zone 2 because it's slow and steady, but actually you can have an awful lot of fun in a zone 2 training session.
Yeah, I think zone 2, I've become a massive preacher. Maybe December last year I've been completely different, but now I'm completely converted to the idea of the aerobic base, and I'm a self-confessed nerd in terms of the physiology sort of research. I've had way too much time during lockdown to delve into some of the recent science on it, and I really believe, firstly, there's no such thing as lactic acid, and go and Google that if anyone has issues with me saying that. And I really believe that you can make massive adaptations. Because we're talking about, a race that's taking 8 to 16 hours in terms of aerobic function, so mitochondria working well, and how many you have in terms of where you're doing your training. So if all of your stimulus is down in the zone 2, you're able to build up a really good base, get more mitochondria. This is super basic. And then if you do a little bit at the high intensity end, you're making those mitochondria basically work better. If you do too much at the higher end, you can't actually do the top end stuff. So you do a lot more just below it. And then you just don't get more mitochondria and you don't get the same adaptations. You get sort of a mediocre effect. That's the theory of polarized training in a nutshell.
So by doing that, you reach a higher peak, as opposed to if you didn't do the lower base training, you'll never actually achieve that higher peak of effort.
Yeah, I think so. And if you're not achieving those super high intensity sessions in your training, you're then not able to adapt in that sort of super compensation model to then perform in racing. But you're also, if you're doing loads and loads of high intensity stuff, you just won't be able to recover as well. So you might be able to physically get it out and do it, but you'll never be recovering from those sessions and actually see as much progress through your training either, in theory. But everybody's different, so there's always a debate there.
And tell me, what was it like stepping up to the start line of the time trial last weekend? Because I know you had done the Ironman VR18 race, but this was really racing with people around you and going into a race situation that you hadn't been in for quite a while. So what was that like?
It was actually it was quite surreal. I took it way too lightheartedly, I think. At the moment, I've sort of developed this mental protection strategy, I think, of it's not happening until I'm actually doing it. So for example, it's not actually going to happen until I'm there. So with the 100 miler, I didn't look at the race course until the Friday when we were sat in Calais waiting to come back on the Eurotunnel from Italy. Yeah, I had a little look at the race beforehand. And then on the start line that morning, I was just very relaxed. It was just a fun day out. I couldn't really believe that we were actually sort of felt a bit surreal. I was really lucky. We were all really lucky that there was a good bunch of triathletes there. So we had a nice little natter in the car park beforehand, socially distanced, of course. And yeah, I think everyone was just really excited. And it didn't really matter about other people. For me, it wasn't the competition. It was just about proving to yourself that the training had worked. And that was the main outcome for me, was that actually, yes, you have made some gains over the last 6 months, because Zwift and your power meter only go so far. You want to actually see what it means in reality.
So talk us through the race. You did 3 hours 55:22 for the 100 miles. Talk us through how the race actually went for you.
So the course was classic British roads. It was not a time trial testing course, which is normally held on a dual carriageway. I think I counted 19 turns, and I think 6 of those were complete 360s, which again is just a bit abnormal. Like we had a few out and backs, but the roads were okay. There were some significant potholes still and traffic. So the course itself didn't lend itself to a quick time initially. But me personally, I am a massive heart rate geek. So I knew it's what I used in my Ironman in Western Australia. I just stuck to what I know I can hold in training and have real confidence in that heart rate is a reflection of how my body is physically coping at the time. So I pushed enough to get my heart rate up at the start, but not too much, and then just really settled into it. Just really enjoyed riding my bike really fast on like fun straight roads mostly. Hadn't done any TT work for a couple of weeks because I'd been out in the mountains, and so I had really low expectations. But I had on my little computer, I only had current heart rate, current power, current speed, and how far I'd travel. So no average power, no, running clock or anything. So I was just thinking about breaking it up into sort of 30, 40K sections, 4 times 1 hour in theory, and just focusing on heart rate. So I just sat at a good heart rate. When I felt comfy after about an hour, I was like, right, I can probably push on a little bit. Felt comfy after 2 hours, right, I'm going to push on a little bit. And then with 1 hour to go, I was like, I really need to actually work it properly. I really need to put some effort in now. So it was really nice getting to I got to about 100K, had a few shouts of confirmation saying, like, you're in the lead. And obviously you don't quite know. So I took that with a pinch of salt. But that was enough motivation, along with the generally feeling quite good, that I was like, right, I'm going to really push on now. And I had a massive last 40K, which was just so much fun. But I got off the bike and I finished the race and I genuinely couldn't get off the bike. I've never experienced that before. My glutes had completely just ceased to function.
Was that from sitting in the same position for so long?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of my turbo on the time trial bike. I do a lot of my road cycling on the road bike. And I know I need to probably do a little bit more on the road on my TT bike. So I'm really comfy in my position. But just the last 2 weeks, I'd been on the road bike. And I think that combined with the long drive back from, although I was mostly a passenger, back from Italy, probably wasn't the best lead up into it. But I think if anyone does a 4-hour relative max effort in the TT position, they're going to be a bit sore. I did make an effort of getting out of the saddle, to stretch off and go up the hills and really work. But yeah, it was a real training stimulus to those glutes.
And how did you fuel the body then during that race?
So I just used the same strategy for my Ironman. So one of the main, it was really the main point of going into this race. One was that it was on my doorstep, 20-minute drive, and 2 was that I wanted to put down a really good race bike leg and then see what I could then transfer into the Ironman race for the future. So I fueled it exactly as I would an Ironman in theory. So I used my Aeroframe sort of elite gel bottle, or I think it's a water bottle, but I just put gels into that and put a little bit of water into it, and then that was it. And then I took a couple of grabs of water bottles, so that you were doing your own or your own support team were able to hand you bottles. So yeah, I've just had a few grabs of those on the uphills, so you're going slower anyway, and so it's easier obviously to grab and you don't lose the speed. But yeah, I actually, if anyone's interested, put it all in an Instagram post the other day about carbs and calories and water, and a few people asked questions about it.
And what about recovery fueling then afterwards, Kat? Because obviously you've got to go into a week of training again, or did you have a week of recovery last week, or what did you do?
Yeah, I had quite a hyped few hours after finishing. Massive endorphins, obviously, although the results weren't confirmed for a little bit, so I didn't want to get too ahead of myself. And then had a massive burger in the pub, so that was great. Recovery, yeah, I think I utilised the idea of that race being a training session. Every time you're going to do a training session or a stimulus, you want to recover as well as you do the training, right? So I had carbohydrate and protein immediately after the race, and tried to drink as much as I could, but you can never really hydrate, I don't think, properly. Had a very relaxed sofa afternoon with the pub, of course. No alcohol. I think that massively affects recovery, even though it's the first thing you want to do. I think I decided, you often don't feel like it. I waited till Monday night to have a little bit of alcohol. And then, yeah, for me, I thought I was going to be fine. I thought it was just going to be a hard day out, like one of my bricks I was describing earlier. In theory, it's just 4 hours of training, so it's like a normal training day for me. But it actually really took its toll. I was really tired Monday, Tuesday. So really stepped back from training slightly. Didn't finish, and my glutes had started giving me some. People will know it as something called sciatica, but I'd been getting this sort of deep referred neural pain down through my glute and into my hamstring. And I was a little bit nervous about that because suddenly racing is coming up. And, if you're starting to get niggles now after 6 months of being good, So I just took that sort of mature response and said, no, I'm just not going to do it. I don't need to prove this to anyone at the moment. I've had a good race. I need to recover properly. And so took a step back, missed a few sessions, got back in the pool. But actually this week following that TT, I have had a house move as well. So training has been as always, a priority, but it has had also shared priorities in there as well in terms of admin. So I'm hoping that I'm fully recovered. And I did a little triathlon yesterday, actually, so a week afterwards, and with no issues. So that's quite nice to just get that tick in the box that, yeah, recovered. Okay, cool. 2-week build now, hopefully Tallinn.
Hopefully Tallinn. And of course, you were meant to race at Ironman Ireland as well. You had it on the list to race at Ironman Ireland. Do you think, will you come to Ireland next year?
Oh, I was so excited. It was going to be like my main race of the year. I'd been chatting to, local people about accommodation, and I was really looking forward to it. I definitely will, depending on when it's going to be in the year. It is a little bit late for me in my head at the moment. I'm hoping that there'll be an Ironman earlier in the year that I can maybe do, ideally this year. To qualify, I really want to get to Pro Kona next year, but we shall see. Talent or performance will judge whether I'm worthy of that spot, because I just feel like I have got so much to do at Kona. Like, I feel I really want to. I never thought I'd be obsessed with it, but I went out to watch it this year with my husband, who's racing in the age group race, and honestly, I was just blown away. It's just an incredible experience. So yeah, if Ironman Ireland fits into that journey, it'd be amazing.
And if you look back over your relatively short career in triathlon to date, because it is quite a short time that you've gone from a very solid age grouper to an extremely good professional athlete, what race has been the one that has stood out the most for you in terms of a highlight?
That is a challenging question. I genuinely love all of the race experiences. And most everyone I've done, I thought, yeah, I could definitely come back here. There's never been races that I have a real negative experience of. I don't like races that have unmatted transition areas. That's a lesson learnt. And if I'm honest, the luxury of travelling to Australia in Busselton, just south of Perth, it's only a 16-hour flight from London. We just seemed to recover really well from that long haul. It wasn't that bad. You could get up throughout and you could race, and the racking was up maybe a week before the event. The sea is crystal clear. There's so many, but it's Australia. It's going to be amazing. But genuinely, it was only a couple of weeks after I met my husband, he raced in 70.3 Dublin. Was it Dunleary?
Dunleary, yeah. Dunleary.
That was my first experience of any Ironman event. I'd never seen or been to anything like it, and it was incredible. He said he wasn't a fan of the speed humps, but the park run, the atmosphere, the seafront start, I did a little long run to see him start, which he wasn't expecting, and I got like this most beautiful sunrise across the coast. So yeah, dreamy Ireland.
So what has been the highlight so far? Because I know you are the ETU middle distance champ in 2019, and that was a big honour to put on the Team GB jersey and to win that race as well. So would that be the highlight of your career to date, do you think? Or is there any other race that stands out for you personally?
That was a lovely title to win. And to wear the GB kit for the first time was incredible. It definitely made the whole experience really great. There's so many GB age group races as well out in Romania, and everyone was just so friendly and so keen and so supportive to each other. Amazing. So that was that whole race experience. But in terms of my own performance, I think it would be tied between Nice, the world champ 70.3s, where I came 16th. Which exceeded my expectation beyond belief, and also my first Ironman. So because I think I was just slightly off the fastest ever, like record books, British debut or something like that. So that was quite cool. And to go sub-9 on my first Ironman, it was just like I just paced it really well, and you just don't hit, like, that doesn't happen. So again, I was just like, well, that's cool. What else can I do? How far can I go now? So it's just exciting.
It's very exciting, and you're very humble as well in how you're telling me the story about all these things, because they're incredible performances. Like, there's athletes out there that have never had those performances that you've had, and yet you're already smashing your own goals out of the park with some of those results. It must be very exciting to think about getting back to racing now post-COVID and just seeing what you can do, especially off the back of the 100 100-mile time trial last week as well.
Yeah, that 100-mile time trial has given me real confidence, because I was really nervous because I've got a whole new bike set up because I've joined the BMC-Vifit Pro Triathlon team. And even though logic says that the bike and all of your equipment is top of the range, best there is out there, I didn't know how I was going to perform on it. I didn't know how I felt about my bike fit. I didn't know how the bike would handle properly in a race. And to get that result on that bike in a new position, I am, really excited. Plus, my running is genuinely better than it's ever been. So if I can stay niggle-free for another month or so, I'm really excited.
And then the aspect of being on the team as well must be different, because a lot of triathletes are part of a club and they'll train with their club mates, but it's different than when you're part of the team, and such a team that's got a stellar lineup of athletes in it as well.
Yeah, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. The opportunity came up, and it just incredible. Yeah, amazing. The team aspect of it, we get together in theory, ignore COVID, January and May for training camps. So I got 2 weeks out in Lanzarote with the team in January, which was just eye-opening into the world of the other athletes on the team and their mentality, their professionalism, their training ethos, and the support that you're given. It is truly professional sport, which is just another, a game changer. And in terms of the kit and equipment, I couldn't ask for more. So I feel like I've got this privilege, an opportunity now that I just want to absolutely capitalize on and, utilize all of those positivities. And therefore, I have that sort of, like you said about a coach, the accountability, like that is a positive pressure that I then want to match and say, yes, I can live up to your expectation and exceed it as well. And I think I've definitely always been one to sort of thrive a little bit on that pressure, even though I naturally am quite nervous and worried about things. I definitely overanalyze a lot of stuff. I definitely try and sort of step up, in terms of, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. So the team aspect, Emma and Chelsea are dreamy, so supportive and genuine. Like I consider them friends, and the guys obviously just amazing athletes, and it's just great to be part of something bigger than yourself. And actually it's not my first experience of that, so the Army has that as well, where you're not just doing triathlon for yourself. It's always about the bigger picture, like always about the team that you're trying to support and your morals as an athlete rather than just you. And I think definitely now doing sport full time, you can start to see how people can become quite selfish in the sport, whereas actually triathlon, part of it is being part of a team and enjoying it with other people. And so the pro team side of that is brilliant, because you get to share those experiences and wear the same kit. And for me, my club, like within the Army, it's just so supportive. Everyone's so keen and they want you to do well, and while you're representing the Army, and the same for anybody in a tri club. It's all about, making friends and just enjoying the sport. I think people lose sight of that sometimes.
And are you proud of what you've achieved so far, Kat?
Yes. So being proud of something is definitely really close to my heart. I think that's been ingrained, like one of those morals in me, definitely at an early age. And I always think, if I'm trying to consider, should I do this, should I not, it's, will I look back on this and be happy that I made that decision, like proud of that decision and proud of the effort I put in? And that really motivates me. So that's definitely one of my sort of semi-self mantras or whatever over this last 6 months, is I want to look back and be proud of how I handled that situation and the effort that I put in, even if it's not 100%, happy that if I put in 95%, that 5% then transfers to me being happy at the same time as being fit. And if you could win any race in the world as a professional athlete, what would it be? Is that a trick question? No. Well, I'm, like I said, I've become a convert. There's no way any professional would turn down the opportunity to pick Kona at this point. But I am really excited to see how Challenge copes with, and Matt, partners up and we progress with the PTO, because at the moment they're doing everything they're saying. So the idea obviously behind the PTO, the Professional Triathletes Organisation, is that we're trying to just increase the awareness of and media of triathlon, worldwide. Like, in the bubble of triathlon, we know it and it's massive. It fills our Instagram and our Facebook. But outside of that, we don't often see, the television side of things. And I think there's so much to offer from the sport, and how that would then translate to the opportunities that, everybody at the amateur and the age group level would get is massive. If we're not having to charge crazy money, there's so much opportunity for the sport. So in the future, I think that there will be some big races that won't necessarily be Kona. And short term, there's also this Challenge Daytona in December, which even though I'm not technically in the rankings for an automatic qualification, I think there's enough people who aren't racing for that to bump up. So I am relatively confident that could be a race that I will qualify for. And that looks crazy, doing a race around a speed strip, or, it's cool. If we get the fun bit back in triathlon, it'd be good.
It's a very exciting time, COVID aside, it's a very exciting time for athletes, both professional and age groupers. And Kat, I suppose having come through the age group rank yourself and done so well and then moved to the pro side of things, is there any advice that you'd give to an age group athlete who's doing really well, who's considering the jump to becoming an elite or a professional triathlete?
Yes, there is. And it no way should ever sound patronising. So it's just meant heartedly, is that if you're good enough to race at that professional level, you will know. And it shouldn't necessarily be a hard decision. If you're getting the results that you need to get your British licence, because the British Triathlon hold that licence very highly, in esteem. If you've got the results, then give it a go. But don't necessarily jump too early. So I think that if you're in that point of considering it, just try and be the best amateur you can be, because it's likely that you're still working a full-time job. Why rush to the professional ranks? It's definitely not as shiny as it looks. And if you're performing and you're winning your age group, like look at Ruth Astle, winning Kona as an age grouper overall, that is massive. So I would say just be the best amateur you can be while you've got a full-time job. And if you get the opportunity to reduce your hours, doing a full-time job, that's when you start to look at the professional ranks. Perhaps, I don't know, that's just my opinion. I think it's about time. I think if you're going to commit to professional sport, you've got to look at the bigger picture and what professional sport is, about, rather than just, I'm going to be a pro. If that makes sense.
And one final question, Kat, what fuels your passion for triathlon?
I love it. I love everything about the geekiness of it. So not just physically going out, I don't like swimming that much, but biking and running. But also the physiology. I love learning about heart rate. I love looking at aerodynamics. I love looking at power and stats and the lifestyle of being fit and healthy. I think if you can fit that into your sort of daily life and be healthy and happy, especially at the moment, as long as you're not crazy, overdoing it, I think most triathletes are probably in the best position for this virus. So yeah, being healthy and happy. But for me at the moment, it's being the best I can physically be. So because I'm seeing gains every month, really, it's really easy to see that effort in is results, outcome. And so while that still maintains, as the more I put into it, the better I get out of it. That's a really easy place to be in terms of motivation. So I'm very lucky in that respect. So yeah, I want to top 10 at Kona, and having come 16th in Nice last year off the back of a few months of full-time training, I want to get to Kona, but I also want to be very competitive there. So at the moment, I've got this crazy big goal that I've set myself, and I've set other big goals in the past and I've just achieved them. So in my head, I'm like, okay, well, why not set another ridiculous one and see where it goes?
Well, hopefully it brings you all the way to a big dance down the red carpet in Kona in 2021. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was a great chat, and best of luck with all the rest of your training and with your race in Estonia, and fingers crossed that does go ahead for you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget you can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. Don't forget to tune in to our Try Talking Sport Facebook page on a Tuesday night at 8:30 for live videos and live interviews with some very inspiring athletes, adventurers and endurance enthusiasts. Now, I'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. Pop by and say hi and let me know what you think of the show. If you are new to Try Talking Sport, please do check out some of our previous episodes. You will be both impressed and inspired by our guests. Until next time, wash your hands, stay safe, and thanks for tuning in.